1846, the United States declared war on Mexico. 2 years later, the war was over, and Mexico had lost half its territory. Overnight, 100,000 Mexicans became foreigners on soil that had belonged to their families for generations. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo promised these new Americans free enjoyment of their liberty and property of every kind. Stepping into this long-simmering land dispute was Reyes Lopez Tijerina. Born in Texas during the 1920s, he was the son of migrant workers. After a prophetic dream about injustice in New Mexico, Tijerina decided to learn treaty law. He was convinced that he could reclaim the Tierra Amarilla grant.
Although we are fighting for land, we are fighting for the survival and protection of our culture.
It was like wildfire in the movement when we heard about it. We heard it like that.
Among land-grant people, there was kind of a victorious sense that finally, you know, our cause is out in the open, and finally, maybe we can galvanize the nation, such as the African-American movement has done.
Some Mexican Americans were alarmed by the violence that had taken place. But Tijerina's actions fired the imagination of movement activists and inspired a corrido, a traditional ballad commemorating the event.
It was at the county courthouse, hamlet of Tierra Maria, June 5th, 1967, the county of Rio Arriba.
After 10 days on the run, Tijerina turned himself in. He now faced state criminal charges.
Out of this whole movement was emerging the feeling we had, this used to be Mexico, this used to be our land, but it was a growing sense of a people and a collective history of struggle against an invasion, an occupation, a takeover, and everything like that. And I think that had a lot to do with it.
The struggle for land inspired urban Chicanos who believed the United States conquest of the Southwest had turned them into second-class citizens.
Certain things you knew, stores you shouldn't shop in, movie theaters you probably best not go to, and still the synonymous sense that the word Mexican went with the word dirty. I remember as a child people feeling that the best thing they could say to me was, well, you're a Spanish girl, aren't you? And I'd say, no, I'm Mexican.
I hated being Mexican. There was no respect, there was no status, there was no participation in the society. My father not speaking good English was an embarrassment when I would go to school as a child. Now, these were things that I wasn't able to intellectualize. These were things that I felt. We were walking around with a tremendous burden of being Mexican in a country that didn't want us except as labor.
This is something that I'll never forget. And I'll never forget it because this was the evening that I asked my wife to marry me.
Edward Roybal, one of the first Mexican Americans elected to Congress, experienced discrimination firsthand.
And the policeman lined us all up, about 14 couples, made us put our hands up over our heads, and they went through our pockets. Then they asked each one of us to show credentials. I gave them my wallet, and after they looked at it, this policeman started to take my cards out of my wallet and drop them to the sidewalk. And then after he did that, he said, now you pick them up. I remember getting on my knees and picking him up. This is something, of course, that a man that had just asked his best girl to marry him will not forget.
In 1967, Corky Gonzalez expressed the feelings and desires of young Chicanos in an epic poem, I Am Joaquin.
I am Joaquin, lost in a world of confusion, caught up in the whirl of a gringo society. I am the masses of my people, and I refuse to be absorbed. I am Joaquin.
Joaquin is a life of all of our people. Joaquin is one of us and is all of us.
The odds are great, but my spirit is strong. My faith unbreakable. My blood is pure. I am Aztec Prince and Christian Christ. I shall endure. I will endure. And now the trumpet sounds. The music of the people stirs.
For Chicanos, I Am Joaquin was a spiritual and cultural revelation. It was the history they had never learned in school. It was a celebration of their Indian and Spanish ancestry, of their Mexican heroes and American lives.
It's the experience that was so moving, because it was such a strong poem, you know, and yet it called you to action, you know, and I identified greatly with it.
Corky gave soul and spirit, gave it the real spirit of what was Chicano nationalism, which was very positive. If there was an ideology out there, Corky was very much the driving force.
Once you teach a man who he is, and you give him pride in himself, you give him the spirit to stand up, there's no society he can't exist in.
Growing up in the barrios of Denver, Colorado, Corky Gonzalez boxed his way out of poverty. At one time, he was the third-ranked world featherweight contender. Later, he went into business selling bonds and insurance. He also turned to Democratic Party politics. In 1960, he registered unprecedented numbers of Mexican Americans to vote for John F. Kennedy.
Corky's motive for becoming involved in the Democratic Party was to bring about the changes that he wanted to see within the Chicano, within the Mexican community at large.
As director of Denver's War on Poverty program, he encountered a patronage system that offered little more than token jobs to Mexican Americans. After a public feud with the Denver mayor, Gonzalez broke with the Democratic Party in 1966 and began a civil rights organization called the Crusade for Justice. He envisioned a Chicano enterprise independent of government involvement.
As long as we're not antagonized, nor are the young people antagonized by people who do show no respect for them.
We, as an organization, we're a nationalist organization, which means we put our priority on our community. We felt if Mexicans didn't stick up for Mexicans, no one else was going to.
Our kids are just as smart as anybody else's kids, given the opportunities. And we wouldn't be fighting so hard if our parents before us would have done what we're doing for our children. And they say, well, this is the way it is, you have to accept it. We found out we don't have to accept it. And our kids are not going to. We're not going to settle for this for our kids. We're going to work with them and teach them our new way of life, which is our right.
Corky was a hell of an organizer, you know. I mean, this is a guy who was really making things happen in Denver. I mean, there was a full-fledged community organization that was very sophisticated for its time, operating out of Denver, Colorado. And it was all centered around this guy called Corky Gonzalez, you know, who was one of us.
Corky Gonzalez would soon gain national attention for Chicanos.
We spend in the so-called war on poverty in America only about $53 for each person classified as poor.
Dr. Martin Luther King had made great strides obtaining civil rights for black people. Now, he wanted to address poverty with a multiracial coalition. King was planning a poor people's campaign in Washington, D.C. during the spring of 1968. he hoped to unite Americans of all colors under one banner to join in a common fight against poverty. Dr. King invited Corky Gonzalez and Reyes Tijerina to be part of that coalition. Only a few weeks before the campaign took place, King was assassinated.
Where are we going? We're going to try to fulfill Dr. Martin Luther King's dream. And if we Mexican Americans march to Washington, it is to tell this country that poverty is not a Negro problem. Poverty is a Mexican American. Poverty is an American Indian. Poverty is a Puerto Rican. Poverty is an Appalachian problem.
There were several busloads of people from northern New Mexico villages and small towns that were going to go. Some people who had never been out of the state before. It was really something.
Seizing the opportunity, some Chicanos gave voice to the frustrations of their people.
Everybody seems to be taking advantage of us, you know. Our Mexican-American brothers and fathers are the ones that go fight in Vietnam, and then when they come back, they have no jobs, they have nothing here to come back to.
Reyes Tijerina and Corky Gonzalez were leaders for the Southwest contingent of the Poor People's Campaign.
The newspapers is speaking nothing but jobs, jobs, jobs. It doesn't mention land, it doesn't mention treaties.
Tijerina viewed the campaign as a means of bringing the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo and his land struggle to Washington's attention.
I would like to state that the Mexican Americans from the Southwest have come here in support of the Poor People's Campaign, to be part of the Poor People's Campaign.
Gonzalez saw a larger objective. He and his followers wanted to create alliances and draw national attention to Chicano issues. But the Poor People's Campaign revealed differences between the participating groups. Without Dr. King's leadership, the campaign was soon floundering. Chicanos became increasingly impatient with the campaign's lack of progress.
Our rights as Spanish Americans and the Indian rights and the poor people, poor whites, are not being represented rightfully.
I would like to say that there is no division in our ranks whatsoever.
Reverend Ralph Abernathy, director of the Poor People's Campaign, tried to resolve the conflict without success. Chicano leaders began setting their own agenda.
It's Magna Carta versus the Supreme Court of the United States. It's the Indian people and 16,000...
At the Supreme Court, Tijerina called for the recognition of Indian rights.
So we are happy that we made history today.
Ladies and gentlemen of Resurrection City, for 9 years,
Mr. Attorney General,
under the... We have 3 more things and then I'll be with you.
At the Justice Department, Corky Gonzalez grew impatient with administration rhetoric. Gonzalez challenged Attorney General Ramsey Clark.
When you say there might be discrimination in housing, then that means that you are either naive or blind. I didn't hear you say anything about the juvenile court, kangaroo court, that subjects our children to controls by people who don't care any more about them than except to advise them to go into the U.S. Army or the Navy or Marines.
Corky Gonzalez was emerging as the leading Chicano voice.
Personality-wise, Corky understood the workings of the politics. He was skilled in that. Reyes was so single-minded around his issues that I think it was difficult for him to swim in that atmosphere. Reyes was not an organizer. He was a leader. Corky was a person who could both organize and lead.
6 weeks after it began, the Poor People's Campaign came to an end. It fell victim to its own internal troubles and to a Johnson administration that had become preoccupied with the war in Vietnam to the detriment of domestic poverty issues. Still, many Chicanos viewed their participation as a success.
When issues of civil rights were discussed, you started seeing that the Mexican-American community was mentioned, if not included. And we felt that we did attain that one goal, that we gained national visibility for a group that previously had been considered an invisible minority.
In Denver, Corky Gonzalez and other leaders announced it was time for Chicanos to meet independently and on their own terms.
We came here to build the new Chicano movement. That's what we came here for.
The first Chicano Youth Conference was to take place at Denver in March of 1969. Chicanos everywhere were invited. Students, teachers, laborers, barrio youth. The coming event attracted considerable attention, not all of it desired.
And FBI files on the Crusade for Justice showed that that very proposal to convene a national gathering of Latino activists immediately drew the concern of J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI.
At that particular point in time, we assumed that we were under surveillance, but we had not yet become paranoid. All the arrest, the persecution, and the attempt to destroy the movement through legal means had not yet taken full hold.
The FBI predicted a poor showing, but the Los Angeles Times expected otherwise and sent veteran reporter Ruben Salazar to cover the event. More than 1,000 came to the meeting, 3 times the Crusade's initial estimate. Within a year, the movement was poised to launch an independent political party. The kickoff would coincide with the demonstration against Chicano casualties in Vietnam.
Anti-war demonstrators protest U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War in mass marches, rallies, and demonstrations. Central Park is the starting point for the parade to the UN building.
President Richard Nixon came to office in 1968, promising to reduce American troops in Vietnam. Instead, he widened the war. Opposition to Vietnam was taking hold in the Chicano community. In the Southwest, Mexican Americans made up 12% of the population, but accounted for almost 20% of the region's deaths in Vietnam, according to many sources.
If you were asked to risk to die for something, what is it you believe in, and what do you owe to that country?
You know, why should you fight over there when our main battle's over here right now?
This is our land. This is our land.
It's easy for the establishment to say, aren't we all the same? Aren't we all Americans? Well, obviously we're not. Otherwise we wouldn't be in the revolutionary process that we are in now.
What, in your estimation, is the most serious problem?
Los Angeles Times columnist Ruben Salazar had been following the Chicano movement ever since the Denver Youth Conference. Chicanos, in turn, were coming to respect his frank commentary.
And when he goes in the army, he goes to...
Salazar now joined Chicanos in vocal opposition to the war.
Many of us are quite grateful that I, for one, probably would never have gone to college if I had not been in the army, thanks to the GI Bill. But the fact remains that we seem to lose more of our people in Vietnam in proportion to the rest of the population.
A Chicano moratorium committee was formed to build momentum against the war.
The idea came up, why don't we have a national meeting and start developing how we nationally do something against the war? So let's have our own Chicano moratorium.
They held anti-war rallies in Chicago, San Francisco, Austin, and Houston, with a major demonstration slated for Los Angeles in August 1970. A moratorium march. Afterwards, Corky Gonzalez and others hoped to convene the first meeting of an all-Chicano political party.
In many ways, the Moratorium March was the apex of the Chicano movement. And it was a moment in which we all felt that we had to speak. And the war was the single most important issue that was confronting the country at the time.
On August 29th, 25,000 to 30,000 Chicanos gathered in Los Angeles to protest the war in Vietnam.
There was a couple getting married at the St. Alphonsus Church. They timed their wedding so they could come right out of the church into the march. Ruben Salazar was there, and he came up right in the middle of, right up Whittier and Atlantic, in the middle of the street, gave me a big thing. Well, you did it.
After a 4.5-mile march, the demonstrators gathered at Laguna Park.
Everybody was there greeting their friends, greeting their families, people that relatives they may not have seen in a long time that they happened to see August 29th.
During the afternoon rally, a disturbance erupted at a local liquor store.
According to the police story, some people went into a liquor store and walked out with some six-packs and went towards the park. And supposedly the shop owner called into the police. The police came and started chasing the people that supposedly took the beer, and the people ran into the park, and then the police wanted to go get them, but the people in the park wouldn't move out of the way, so they had to call more police and declare it an illegal assembly. That was their pretext that they used, to break up a demonstration of 25,000, 30,000 people against the war in Vietnam in East LA. So you had a panic, you had a stampede, a human stampede.
A lot of destruction took place on both sides. The police called it a Chicano riot. The people called it a police riot.
Demonstrators found refuge in nearby homes or in local businesses as police forced people out of the park and into the streets.
I was in the restroom with little children that were there. They were very scared. They were crying. The mother had never seen such a thing.
Deputy Sheriff Thomas Wilson responded to a report that an armed person was in the Silver Dollar Bar on Whittier Boulevard.
When I approached the doorway, I knew I had a tear gas projectile in the weapon. I wanted to get something inside, and I wanted to get it inside quick. I attempted to aim up towards the ceiling to bounce the projectile to the rear of the bar.
Some people inside never heard the orders to come out. Among them, Ruben Salazar.
Sometime later, after the gas cleared, information was received that the victim, Mr. Salazar, was inside the location, had been injured. The officers investigated, and they found that he was dead and was lying approximately 20 to 25 feet inside the front door.
And it is your opinion...
The deputy sheriff's tear gas canister hit Salazar in the head, killing him.
If it was an accident, it happened because the lives of Mexican people were considered worthless. So that you could fire a huge tear gas projectile into a bar, a public place, and not worry about it. It happened that it took off Ruben Salazar's head.
Chicanos mourned the loss of a friend and their only ally in the mainstream media. The death of Ruben Salazar had a profound impact on the Chicano movement.
I think that the sheriffs, proved the point that for the Chicano, the war is more here in the struggle for justice than over in Vietnam.
We had considered the possibility of violence, being that there were so many people, but certainly not deaths.
200 people were arrested, 60 were wounded, 3 died, and plans to create an all-Chicano political party were postponed.
We lost a certain heart. We lost a certain innocence of our ideals, that we could engage the country through the country's own ideals of the Bill of Rights, the ideals that the country was supposedly founded on, and that we could be killed.
All people who are struggling for more social justice, it's a long struggle. But there are traditions that get set, there are concepts that get established, there's visions that get put out, there's dreams that get dreamed. And just having those in our lives and in our minds is a victory in itself.